blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take me for granted and you know I'm leaving. I'ma take what's mine with the webs I'm weaving. I could take this crowd from seeing to believing. Got a taste for blood and my tongue keeps bleeding. From the words I spit, so sharp, so freezing. So cold, behold, frostbite they feeling. I could tear you apart or I could go heal them. Don't believe in fate, don't believe in ceilings. I just need a taste and my mind starts feeling. I don't pace myself, I grind on kneeling. Got lust for change, I just love the feeling. I ain't gonna give up. Got too little time, I'ma live up. Head down, push forward through the tough times. Cause anything worth doing is a tough climb. And I ain't gonna give up. Got too little time, I'ma live up. Head down, push forward through the tough times. Cause anything worth doing is a tough climb. Cause I'ma live life for the fight, yeah, I'm here to get it. I got drive, got sight, always have a vision. I don't lie at night, I be in my feelings. I'ma be fine, need time, and I'll still be winning. I live life for the fight, yeah, I'm here to get it. I got drive, got sight, always have...
Hello, everyone. This is another episode of Secular Activism Unfiltered. I'm your host, Kelly, better known as the Detroit Atheist Queen. So before I start the show today, I did want to promote our fundraiser that Helen Hells Bells and I are doing. So to appreciate everybody for us both getting 300 members on our channels, separate channels, we want to have a contest. The contest is pretty easy to enter. One, you must subscribe to Helen's channel, Freethinker Fireside, my channel, Detroit Atheist Queen, as well as Black Nonbelievers channel. And you must comment on the last post that you have done that. And 2 people will be randomly picked to receive online tickets for the Revival of Reason, which will take place in Atlanta, Georgia on June 12th through the 14th. Also, there are still tickets available for you to attend either in person or online. So hopefully I will see you guys there. Now on to the show. My guest is a South African religious studies PhD, Tristan Kapp. Or is it Cape? And you froze.
Hi, Kelly.
Okay. Hello. Oh, there you go. Okay, good. Okay, good. Hello, how are you? Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me, Kelly.
Yes. So I have some questions that I like to ask my guest, and I'm used to ask more generic questions, but now I try to dive deeper into the actual guest to find out more about you. So the first question I have for you is, when you reached out to me, you mentioned that you started deconstructing around 19, and that really stayed with me. When you think back to before that, what kind of religious background were you coming from? What were you taught, and how deeply were you immersed in it?
So I was raised Christian, although my parents were both very open-minded about it. Little actually wanted to introduce us to a variety of religious institutions and religious practices, but my dad thought that might not have been the best foundation. So inevitably, I joined the traditional Dutch Reformed Church, the sort of traditional South African version of the Baptist Church. And from there onwards, I moved on to the evangelical scene in my teenage years. joined a bunch of mega churches, spent time with a pastor that was quite independent and somewhat strange, if you will, sort of tried to make certain advances towards me that I wasn't really comfortable with at that age. And eventually, after basically suffering a bit of trauma emotionally from that, I decided, well, perhaps I might benefit from going to this. So I went and did my Bachelor of Divinity in Theology at the University of Pretoria, and that started my deconstruction process when I saw, for example, how the church acted towards some of my queer friends who asked me, like, you study theology, what does the Bible say about homosexuality? And I remember that forcing me to introspect and basically engaging in some very deep questions about my beliefs. And research on my own and engaging with some of my lecturers, which church paper on what's it, theology and sexuality and biblical ethics, which eventually it pioneered my research journey. I became interested in the intersectionality of the body and spirituality, and so I deconstructed the church and how it intersects with feminism and feminist thought, and eventually coming down to the fact of how the church basically over the body to oppress women throughout its history. And thus began my deconstruction journey from religion, because I saw not only how the church treated its queer members, but also how it treated its women. And I thought that was not something that I really wanted to affiliate myself with, seeing as though that in the Bible, you get this figure of Jesus who was very open towards women, and even what we today, something like that. So the idea of that Jesus archetype that was created by the Bible, and the church not essentially, and Christianity overall not living up to that standard while preaching it, created a cognitive dissonance, which led me to deconstruct and question everything, which eventually led me to do my master's in theology, which I again focused on the body, but then I moved beyond the mere ethics of the body and sort of and there I engaged in body politics once again, and then thereafter arriving at my PhD fully deconstructed as an atheist, and basically getting involved in Satanism while I was in my master's, and dabbling with that ideology, thinking about that, and basically adapted a lot of that into my current belief system as an atheist today. So PhD, I then moved beyond mere Christianity lens and started investigating the idea of post-theism, what scholars would term secular but not religious, or spiritual but not religious, which is a form of secular spirituality even, which I thought was quite interesting because of the fact that as an atheist, I still had a mild curiosity for the sacred. I believe Richard Dawkins told Jordan Peterson once in an interview, he's drunk like that approach or that description, because I quite find myself intoxicated with symbology and ancient cultures myself.
Now, you are a little bit younger than me. I'm assuming you might be closer to my children's age. What was your take on, or did you have any acknowledgement of apartheid and stuff? Can't
Yes,
hear you.
absolutely. In
Oh,
fact, that is one of the
okay.
most prominent. That was one of the most prominent focuses of my research, especially for my PhD, because of the fact that as a white South African and as a religion scholar and deconstructing Christianity and race relations and all of that, Christianity and religion, as well as racial segregation, forms the backbone backbone of the apartheid system. It was rooted in Christianism and rooted in a form of segregation based on race, which was rooted in the fundamental idea that the white men and the white people were God's chosen nation. And there was a, a research paper that I published earlier this year on occult crime. It's called "The Devil Made Me Do It." And essentially, I just explained the idea of essentially apartheid extracting this idea of Satan as a malevolent figure, instead of blaming white Christians, who are most likely, in the cases I mention as case studies, the perpetrators of the murder, and essentially basically reinforcing this apartheid era chosenness myth that white people, and especially to a large degree Calvinists as a whole, cling to. In fact, the apartheid system in South Africa was inspired by, in of itself, is quite fascinating.
Yeah. Okay. It just really hearing you. I only asked you one question so far, but your thought process to realizing that this was wrong, and you got people that are way older than you that still can't get a grasp that how women are treated, slaves, how black people were treated, how gay lesbian people were treated. It's not right, and some people don't. If everybody can't click that in their heads that this is not a right. This is how this system isn't right. So now, ask my second question. After you made the decision to step down from religion, what led you to go deeper into studying it to the point of pursuing a PhD instead of just walking away completely? I'm going to step away, but I will be listening.
So I get that quite a lot. And I think the idea of what forced me to, after my stepping down of religion, is my hunger for knowledge, the idea of the insatiable curiosity that involves doing a research study. As an atheist, I have learned to appreciate the value of empiricism. And as I moved away from religion and more engrossing myself in facts and research, I discovered a whole world of studying how people think, how ancient civilizations approached reality, and how religion as a form of making sense of the world emerged not only as a sort of proto way or a prototype for science, essentially. If we're talking about the what's it called? The earliest human species used religion to essentially make sense of the world around them. So the idea beyond that, moving beyond from the proto-humanities and creating that construct and that timeline, was curious to me. And that's why for my PhD, I wanted to draw that line about how we got to this idea of humanity starting what this great scholar Messiah Eliade spoke of, the sacred and the profane. Humanity worshipping the profane, worshipping nature as sort of divine embodiment through nature, and these sort of pagan and proto-humanistic traditions. How did we get from there to atheism and even, dare I say, post-theism today? And how did we get to religion as a form of social control, and why is it still effective? And that basically got me interested in cults, high control forms of belief, or as the great religion scholar in South Africa, David Chidester, referred to it as a form of not religion or non-religion, essentially. Not atheism per se or secularism, but the mere fact that the idea of a cult does not qualify, according to him, as a formal religion, but as non-religion, as in the literal sense. So I was fascinated also by the philosophy of the self. And my PhD investigated a lot of that aspect from various cultural perspectives, from the West and the East and the Africa. And of course, once you intersect these ideas, the idea of how the West has approached both paradigms are absolutely fascinating. In the one sense, you've got the West elevating itself as the thinkers of society. When we think of traditional philosophy, we think about Descartes, we think about Nietzsche, we think about Hume. We never speak about individuals like Steve Biko, or never speak about individuals like, what's that American philosopher's name? Martin Luther King, who even in his own right was a philosopher. We never speak about these individuals who pioneered the Black movement in globally, speaking with regard to philosophy. And then, of course, with the East, we've got this enigmatic way of mythologizing the East. We've got this way of approaching the East as some sort of esoteric, exotic other. And these different approaches to the East and the West got me thinking about how the colonial mindset is even entrenched in our scholarly systems. And the idea of deconstructing religion involves deconstructing politics and social hierarchies and stuff like that. Even Marx, whose PhD thesis, ironically enough, I used for my PhD thesis, spoke about that very same thing in his idea of how ancient philosophy approached the idea of personhood and how that intersects with religion and the self. So the idea of the self differs, where the West focused on this idea of some guy thinking in a bathtub about what it means to be alive, whereas the second guy in the East focused on what it means to have a good life. Whereas in the African context, you've got this entirely different archetype where it's about Ubuntu. It comes from the saying Umuntu Ngumuntu Ngabantu, which means I am a person because you are a person, because we are people together. And this collective idea and philosophy of Ubuntu inspired a communal philosophy about how communities together thrive. And this is something that, because of things like Eurocentrism in philosophy and to a certain degree in academia, and religion, which is largely influenced by Christianity, and these are things that as I started researching, as I started investigating, I started gaining insight into the taboos. I mean, I always joke when people ask me, where did I study or what did I study? I always joke and say that I'm the most controversial thing to walk out of the University of Pretoria's theology faculty after apartheid. So it's quite ironic how, especially these power systems function is the core of my research and still remains the core of my research.
Okay. I will say that, let people know. I don't know why, but a lot of times when I have African guests, the frequency is pretty bad. But you'll lag a little bit, and then you'll come on.
Okay,
You,
can you at
yeah.
least follow everything
Oh
I
yeah, I
say?
follow. We follow you. I follow you. I don't know about our people in the audience, but I do follow you. Whatever. But yeah, I walked away because told you I had
Okay.
to grab my food earlier, so I missed a little bit. But that was my fault for walking away. But I got the end part. Whatever.
No worries.
I don't want to show my foot. People might get jealous of me. Okay, so the next question I have were you in were you in that in between phase, no longer fully believing but not fully settled yet, and what did that feel like emotionally for you? I know I did.
So yeah, so the deconstruction process was a difficult one because of the fact that, you know, I am uniquely positioned as a religion scholar, and as going through deconstruction, I always explain to people that it's like to mourn that part whilst questioning the fundamental, building blocks of what led you to that personhood. And I think it was a difficult, emotionally thing, to be quite fair. During my deconstruction process, I was at the brink of committing suicide due to the fact that it was a moment of immense anger deconstruction truly involves, and how deconstruction essentially works in the individual psyche, and how much turmoil that affords the individual. So being in a scholarly position didn't make it any easier, because of the fact that you question your questions, and you question even the reactions on your questions, and you question your own biases. So all of these things play a massive role. So it was very, I would say, difficult. And being in South Africa, we are uniquely positioned in the fact that we still have a majority Christian population. So even though we do have a quite significant atheist population, or a non-religious population, there's not much of a viewpoint, or a sort of a public voice per se, if you could call it that, that's currently pioneering out in the open the atheist. There have been a more vocal group of people, for example, like my friend Tersha and my friend, colleague Dean from Atheist Republic. So there's that. But aside from these individuals as well, and I forgot to mention, we've also got the South African Secular Society, which is brilliant in and of itself, and it trains secular marriage officiants. But aside from these organizations, there aren't really individuals who have championed this. And so there's not really a place where you can go and walk in and say, hey, I need a non-religious mentor. So all of these things are pretty much stuff, well, at least I experienced it that way, things that I had to discover on my own, and basically go through the motions in and of myself, and simultaneously ask what the impact might be on future relationships, or what might be there. And so I've gotten used to being the black sheep of the family in most instances, as I'm sure a lot of secular individuals and atheists and people who have left the traditional flock can relate. But the main point behind it is merely that it was difficult, but it was necessary. And I think during the time, what really carried me, I believe, was reading Nietzsche. I believe I was reading his book, Die fröhliche Wissenschaft, or The Joyful Wisdom, which is about a collection of anecdotes. So Friedrich Nietzsche was basically one of the, he was one of the most prominent Western Enlightenment thinkers that was very, very, I believe, what we could call today anti-theist. Is quite interesting. And there's a parable that remains quite central to his doctrine, called God is Dead. It's basically the parable of the madman, where a madman walks into society with a lamp in his hand and arrives and see all the people, and basically he asks, where is God? In German it is wo ist Gott? Asking, where is God, where is God? And the people started laughing at him, jeering at him, joking. Has he gone to sleep? Has he gone on holiday? Has he died? Whatever. Basically making light of his situation. And so he basically used this as an anecdote for essentially where this madman drops down his lantern in complete dismay at the public's misunderstanding of his rhetorical question. And so he engages in this lamentable diatribe, or basically lamenting the death of God, basically creating it as the biggest homicide humanity has ever committed by unchaining the sun from its, and he uses the most beautiful metaphors to describe it in his book. But the idea behind it is merely served as everything what people created as a society of what is good, of what is orderly, and what is essentially normative. And so what Nietzsche basically illustrates is that I think he, to a certain degree, embodies the very deconstruction phase in delineating what it means to lose one's religion and to lose that and to confront the disillusionment that comes from being religious and then not being religious anymore. And so at the end of the diatribe, the madman basically walks away, and like basically the prophets of old basically says that I have come too soon, and that the people will not listen to me because I have not yet arrived at the right time, in a way. I'm very paraphrasing it. So to the people who are more ardently, to the people who are more ardently educated in philosophy, please don't come and hate me.
I'm not gonna hate you. I don't know. I'm just crazy. Okay. So next question I have. Did you ever try to hold on to parts of your belief system, or did it unravel all at once? What surprised you most about yourself during that deconstruction process?
That is a wonderful question. I, to a large degree, my humanity and to let go of, but was something that thrived as a result of my religious predisposition initially. So I think a lot of things changed other than my outlook on life, which is fairly around justice and doing right and doing good. I think I learned the other day, thanks to my psychiatrist, that it's as a result of my ADHD and my autism, but I never thought about, because I cared ever since I was young. I really cared about doing the right thing. And I think this is something that quite surprised me, because of the fact that one often learns or thinks that morality is solely dependent on religion. I mean, one of the most prominent religious comedians, Ricky Gervais, for example, has joked about this, where he said people frequently ask him as an atheist, what prevents you from going to rape and pillage and murder people because of all of the religious laws that you've now abolished? What prevents you? And ideally, objectively speaking, nothing prevents one from doing it. But I think that one's humanity is not stripped from you once you lose your religion. And this is something that I wouldn't say surprised me, but I believe pleasantly surprised me, rather, because of the fact that from your community, from exposure to religious people, the non-humanity of atheism and atheists is what essentially drives this entire reasoning behind portraying atheists and atheism as they are. So I think the humanity of it and the justice centrism basically just got stronger, where I basically wanted my peers in 12th grade to follow the Bible and not tending to be very respectable Christians. That same mindset intensified in my atheism, and I became even more intensely focused on, if you say you believe a thing, why not act like it? Why not represent yourself as is? And if you change during the process, that's perfectly okay. Just acknowledge it. Just be honest with yourself and be honest with everybody else. And as a even going through my anti-atheist stage, I thought at some stage I was angry at religion and angry at God, but I was pleasantly surprised that this anger wasn't fueled by an anger at a sort of a external deity, but more the anger that was emergent from the injustice that nobody is doing anything about, and that nobody is holding the church accountable for example.
Still not. Never. I don't think they ever will. Sadly.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%, unfortunately.
Okay, so now we're gonna have our little commercial break. It's halfway
No
between the
worries.
thing. So do a little commercial break, enjoy, and then we'll finish and I'll ask the rest of the questions. Gotta find what I'm gonna play next.
In 2024, NASA researcher Rachel Lenz gave the world a flag made from NASA images for Pride Month. On January 20th, 2025, the incoming U.S. administration ordered that Artistic Union of Science and Civil Rights deleted. So I tracked down the original images it was made from, recreated it, and then added even more wonders of the cosmos to update the flag to the current, more inclusive form. On the anniversary of the inauguration, I released it. And it went viral several times. Now you can get a physical copy of that artwork as a full-sized flag or a large sticker, as well as space artworks of the other Pride flags: lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, intersex, ace, and new flags being added all the time. Get one for yourself or give them as gifts and celebrate Pride, celebrate science, celebrate resistance, and help support a creator fighting for human rights for all humans. Head to astralpride.com.
So I do want to show that I have ordered a flag. This is the progressive.
Wow.
That's the progressive flag. Beautiful stuff. Pride Month is next month, so go to astralpride.com and support my friend Ember. Okay, now continue with the questions. You explore a lot of alternative spaces. What drew you there on a personal level and not just an academic one?
Sorry, could you repeat that for me, please?
Okay.
You got lost a bit there.
Okay. You explore a lot of alternative spaces. What drew you there on a personal level, not just an academic one?
So I think on a personal note, coming from started South Africa, well, not started, but was involved in South Africa's very own version of a satanic temple, which was the South African Satanic Church, but which ended up being a cult when the founder eventually turned to Christianity and basically perpetuated the very satanic panic tropes that basically perpetuated. So in my investigation, you lose your religion, I think one of the things that basically I believe I found it to be quite fascinating was to investigate and basically explore everything, and what was told to me was as a child was evil and wrong and all of that. And so the idea behind it, what I found interesting, was particularly when I was on a trip with a bunch of friends. We got baked at his place, and it was from, I think it was a day after university during my undergraduate, no, it was during my master's, where we drove to the local mall and we walked around in the bookstore, the local bookstore, and I decided on a whim to go buy the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey, and I read it. Okay. And similar to Nietzsche, I found the content liberating in a sense that it described exactly what I felt at the moment. You know, the injustice, the anger, and not the anger per se, but the criticism that is so articulately phrased, even though Anton LaVey himself, if you go into the history, was a con man. He was quite the writer, and even used a lot of poetry and sources as inspiration for his work. Some of them not too great. Book, that's the idea behind it is merely that it's fascinating to read, and the idea of personal autonomy and the focus on liberation, the liberation from the self, from dogmas, except those on which you essentially embrace yourself. So I think that personal inspiration coming from a Christian background, the juxtaposition of going from you are a sinner, you are nothing, idea you are empowered, you are the master of your own ship, the creator of your own reality. That sort of idea is brilliant, and it's wonderful, and it's empowering, and it really asserts oneself in your journey, and I believe, in my sense, asserted me and created a wonderful, fearless attitude towards criticizing religion, which, again, coming from religion, deconstructing, becoming an atheist, or even non-religious, for example, is you emerge out of this bubble, and you're fearful of shaking the bubble or shaking the boat because of the fact that you wonder what cost, at what cost would it be. And I learned that, what the heck, why not do it? If I am going to live a sort of a hedonistic lifestyle per se, indulging in everything that is great and wonderful about life, I might as well go full Monty and criticize everything. And I remember also watching Monty Python, and which I frequently watch as a sort of a ritual, the Monty Python's Life of Brian, which is again a wonderful analogy to see how religion in and of itself grows, and how mockery and even jokes are a way of understanding serious things. So even joking about religion, and even joking about the sacred cows per se, has been frowned upon, or is frowned upon in religious circles. So in a personal journey with regard to the alternative spaces, again, I found a new community there. I also engaged, and this is where I became friends with the pagan scene. So after I left the Satanic Church and the Satan sort of ideology, which, again, just for the record, Satanists do not worship the devil. These conspiracy theories about, Babel, basically baby sacrificing and stuff.
Atheists sacrifice babies too, though.
Special agent for the FBI, who wrote a document on it in 1992, investigating these things and basically creating or identifying them as psychological fabrications as a result of a moral panic era where evangelicalism took over, and everybody was fear of change and globalism, what have you not. So on the alternative religion sphere, I drawn to esoteric religion and esoteric spirituality, which framed a large part of my PhD research. And the idea of esotericism basically involving everything from Aleister Crowley to paganism to Satanism to the Egyptian Book of the Dead to even Helena Blavatsky and Theosophy. Even I at some stage used, what was his name? I forgot his name, the writer but anyway, who basically, all of these philosophies have some esoteric element to them in the sense of what lies beyond the veil. Not in a woo-woo spiritual conspiracy theorist sense, but in the sense of what lies beyond the idea of selfhood. Okay, now you've decided to own yourself. Now you've sort of created a relationship, and how do you understand that from an atheistic perspective?
Yeah.
And I think that was the main core of my journey, which unfortunately or fortunately, most of my research comes from. It's not things that I grab out of the air. It's stuff that that come from my personal journey that I wanted to make sense of. And so I decided to research it and get a degree in it, essentially.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's essentially, and I eventually joined the South African Pagan Rights Alliance, which is an advocacy network that focuses on religious freedom as well as focusing on religious equality. Yes. Yeah, so I was appointed as the spokesperson for the South African Pagan Rights Alliance, I think a few years ago. And it's been a wonderful, spokesperson and interfaith officer. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So it must be one of your fans.
So this basically created me the platform where the wonderful individuals, including Mr. Damon Leff and Simi, who does our the marriages, these individuals have told me, like, listen, we know you're non-religious, we know you're an atheist, and we don't care. And essentially, we understand the value and the idea of community. And some years ago, I was even I was even honored with being a keynote speaker at the annual book really spoken about. So the wonderful idea of these alternative communities is that you engage with such an amount of diverse people, and also juxtaposing that with coming from Christianity, you are really exposed to a sort of a really monolithic sort of community. You really don't engage with any other people outside of that sphere, because the mindset of religion in and of itself, I mean, mainstream religion basically requires one to be inside this bubble, because everything outside that bubble is ostensibly dangerous. It is frightening. It is to be avoided at all cost. And this is how religion maintains a hegemony. This is how brainwashing occurs. This is how people remain devoted even to Scientology, because of mind control, because of the fact that it's not as simple as I tell you to do this and you do that. Similar to, I think, the United States still remains, I think, what Christian cults in all of history. I think it was the Heaven's Gate or something.
Oh, that was,
and the other guy, I don't know if it's the same thing. I think I'm thinking of two different things. But anyway, the guy basically who got his congregation to commit mass unaliving by drinking poison or something like that.
It's been more than one.
Yes.
The David Koresh.
It's been several.
Was
and
one.
I quite follow them, or try to follow them quite actively. But the idea of it is, and the brilliant thing about it is that during this investigation and reading up on these things, I also encountered the wonderful Professor Janja Lalich, who in the United States is the foremost cult specialist. And I think the Association for Cultic Studies is also based in the United States. So one of these wonderful communities is the idea of how religion intersects with that idea of control, and how non-religion, especially in the fringe movements per se, have this personal idea of freedom and humanity and this idea of diversity. Like, no matter who you are, come and join us if you have something to offer of value. And so I think that combating justice and injustice as well, while as both an interfaith officer as well as the spokesperson of the South African Pagan Rights Alliance, has afforded me the idea of, for example, challenging public high schools on religious worldviews from their curricula, or even including religion in state schools, which is illegal in South Africa, according to a High Court ruling. And a lot of people don't know this in South Africa. In 2017, there was the O God movement, which in Afrikaans translates to Organisasie vir Godsdienstonderrig en Demokrasie, which basically translates to Organization for Religious, what's it? Organization for Religious Education and Democracy, which basically filed with the High Court and took this primary school, or in your country an elementary school, took them to court, to the highest court in South Africa, and well, not the highest, but the highest local court, And the Johannesburg High Court ruled that it was in fact illegal to prefer a single religion over another without including everyone. It is in fact illegal, according to the South African Constitution.
Okay.
In and of itself is discriminatory. But the fact of the matter remains is that the Oh God movement won that case, and that became a landslide sort of precedent that other cases and other judgments ought to follow. Because of the fact that if you want to overrule a high court decision, you have to go to the Equality Court or the Constitutional Court in South Africa, which is a process in and of itself. So the legal, what do you call it, precedent remains binding, and it's sort of applicable, but conveniently, because South Africa has an 84%, thereabout 85% Christian religious population, they can put up Christian billboards, they can, recite the Bible in schools without having to worry about other children's parents complaining. So even though it being intrinsically at the heart of it, not about the parents complaining, but as a result of inclusivity and offering children the option.
Yeah. I mean,
everybody.
Now since I have become an atheist, I'm not saying that I want, like, usually you go to a school, they only want you to learn one religion. I do feel that we do need to learn different religions, even as
Absolutely.
an atheist perspective.
Absolutely.
And learn it as a class, like you learn history or something, but it being biased.
Yeah. I completely agree with that, but unfortunately, that is not what it. Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on that, but unfortunately, that is not what's happening in South Africa. We have subjects like history on high school level. I don't know about other high schools or stuff like that, or even elementary schools or primary schools, but the idea of it is merely that educating about religion is one thing, but practicing religion and preferring one religion and privileging that religion above the other is disingenuous. I, for example, live in a predominantly Muslim area. I've attended iftars. I attended a prayer meeting with the defense attaché for the Indonesian embassy in Pretoria once, and wonderful experiences that only enriched me. And I think that if every child and every person opens themselves up to this conversation, we get to learn more about humanity. And I think this is what is missing from religious education. I think the aspect that is missing, and I'm speaking exclusively in South Africa, is the idea of education instead of indoctrination. There's a difference between educating people and allowing a kid, for example, to read one scripture from the Bible one day and another verse from the Quran another day, or the Bhagavad Gita, or the Talmud, or whatever. The idea of it is merely to diversify and not to exclude. And what indoctrination does via hosting certain events, via enshrining certain Christian values, is the fact that they are already exclusionary by and large, or from the get-go. So that's merely the idea behind it, and the problem I have. But religious education is an absolute must, and I think it would be quite disingenuous for me as a scholar of religion to oppose that. I can't hear you, Kelly.
I realized I muted myself.
Oh,
some
dear.
of the biblical stories are very interesting. If you take it as what it is, it's a story. And it kind of shows you the thought process of
but
what
with stories, and we commonly deal with. Yeah, no, continue. I interrupted you.
Yeah, no. Yeah, so that's, but if you take it as a story and not as this literal truth book, you get so much more out of it.
Absolutely. And I think not just that, but sort of understanding its parallels, because if one of conversation myths and how they, for example, get recycled, if you will, every now and again. As scholars, we deal with the term religious syncretism and mythology. So mythology, whenever people hear mythology, they think of Greek mythology or Norse mythology, which is correct, but it's not exclusively about pagans and pantheons consisting of a large variety of gods. The idea fiction or to historical biography, for example, or even fantasy that deals exclusively with the subject matter at hand, which is the relationship with the divine and humanity. And specifically, in the biblical sense and in a religious sense, you get these basically stories, as you put it, that has been conversed and dealt and orally transmitted over centuries, or from generation to generation. But these are more than just campfire stories. These are literal traditions that ancient cultures employed because they did not have the ability to write. And so how do you transmit knowledge when you don't have the ability to write? You share it with other people. And of course, the human bias, of course, influences this retelling of this story, and we attach our own interpretations of these stories and our own confirmation bias.
Yeah. Sorry,
Obviously
technical
contaminates
difficulties.
the story, and that's thing with the biblical texts. Oh, no worries. So where did you lose me?
Oh man, I just went off. Say the last thing you said over again.
Where did you lose me?
That's what I'm trying to.
Oh,
My mind, I was
talking
listening, but
I
saw quick. I forget stuff. My ADHD brain, I think I have. Hold on. I cannot remember.
The
I forget.
recycling of myths and
There
the
we are.
idea
Okay.
basically. Sorry, can you hear me?
No, you were saying. I was like, yeah, that was one of the part you were at. Okay.
Oh, okay. So the idea of recycling myths, and now it's not only campfire stories, but also traditions where people transmit knowledge over generations. And of course, with confirmation biases, the main story gets contaminated per se with other.
Yeah, it gets
So
contaminated.
the idea behind it is just that how a lot of the stories that people think are original to the Bible are not original, but are recycled myths from stories that were doing the rounds in the ancient Near East.
Yes.
And a wonderful expert on that is Dr. Josh Bowen.
Him and Dr. Kipp are really close. Him and Dr. Kipp work together.
I think I remember Dr. Kipp.
Yes,
I think we had a conversation with Dr. Bauer at some stage. But anyway, Dr. Bauer is a much better expert on this than I am, and even Professor Bart Ehrman and Daniel McClellan. Brilliant scholars in the field that are much more adept on this explicit subject material than I necessarily am.
Okay.
But the idea of it from a comparative perspective, which is where my field is of comparative religion, you see the parallels and you see the relationships and how these stories echo each other and sort of mix with each other and mix with other traditions and create hybrid religions. And that's why even when we talk about religion and Christianity in the biblical times, we don't speak of monotheism, which is the worship of a single God exclusively. We talk about henotheism in the sense that the single God is acknowledged and solely
technical problems
or denial that other gods exist in a lot of the ancient Near Eastern deities which were popular back then.
Yeah, that was one of the first things that I saw when I deconstructed my daughter, who also is one is agnostic, I will say, the other one is a straight atheist. She was showing me like these YouTube channels that were showing us how different religions had a lot of the same stories as the Bible, but were predated the Bible. And that's one thing that got to me. Like, wait, these are pre-told stories, so this is not true. Then, why am I
I
believing
wouldn't
this?
say it's yeah, absolutely. If you translate it from a belief and in sense of an objective truth, yes, it's not true.
If I take your life and write a story about it as my life, yeah, that's crazy. And they think this is literal fact. You know,
Absolutely, and this is why religion has hijacked, well, basically organized religion has hijacked the idea of critical thought instead of recognizing these, I believe, origin stories and these sources as what do you call it, advantages. They have seen them as threats rather than embracing the reality that this is history, and unfortunately, or fortunately rather, facts do not care about feelings.
some of the questions that I have, I want to add. We kind of touched about the Satanism and stuff like that, which I had questions about it, but you kind of answered them. This sometimes things happen like that, but I will ask this question: how do you personally stay grounded when you're constantly engaging with a wide range of belief systems?
Could you repeat that? I lost you
Sure.
there
Okay,
at the
okay.
last sentence.
How do you personally stay grounded when you're constantly engaging with a wide range of belief systems?
I think it's quite easy because I think the religion being as an either or is somewhat of a misnomer. I think people, again, with regards to Christianity, my history with organized religion has taught you that there's only one religion and that religion is the correct one. Whereas in my research for my thesis, I encountered this wonderful anecdote by the Buddha, where it's called the Kalama Sutta, where he engages his friend Kalamas and basically tells him that if you find something that resonates with you, follow it. If it leads to wisdom, if it leads to ethical behavior, if it leads to a good life, embrace it. If it does not do these things, do not listen to this guy. This guy is my contemplative teacher, or this guy is my guru, or this guy told me to do it. If you decide for yourself that these things are good and benevolent and wonderful, then remain in them. And I think as a non-religious person, it's easier to be impartial towards religion. I mean, I am well happy with someone going crazy and playing in a sand pit and eating sand, if that's what they like to do. But if you would come to my house or my place and tell me that you need to start eating sand, otherwise you will die or face eternal damnation in mud, then I would tell you you're crazy and get out of my house. And that's my idea behind it, is just that my atheism, instead of making me intolerant, has made me intolerant towards hypocrisy instead of intolerant towards religion as a whole. And I think religion, during my research as well, and I think it was an article that I read by the great Professor Wouter Hanegraaff, who is one of the leading scholars in Western esoteric basket, where it's not an either or. You don't walk past your grocery list and say, you know what, I'll either choose the green peppers or the red peppers or the jalapenos or the fajitas. I include all of them. If I want both of them, I'll take both. If I want one of them, I'll only take one of them. And so you can load as much or as little into your basket as you want, as long as it encourages you, as long as it makes you essentially happy. If it makes you happy, if it makes you wonderful, feel good about yourself and increases your livelihood, I say, why the hell not? The idea probably basically just comes to the fact that if you basically live according to a set of values, to use an example of do not look lustfully at a woman, according to the Bible, for example, and you then go as a pastor and engage in relations with a minor, that's pretty hypocritical. And then reasoning that away is also hypocritical. That's deliberately not following the biblical rules. No, obviously, I can think of absolutely no other crime that is deserving of the death penalty and eternal punishment than the molestation of a child and the harming of a child or a woman, for that matter, non-consensually. But the analogy within the framework of religion is that all of these things are justifiable and that all of these things are okay because of the general mindset that it's basically a free-for-all, but you are essentially just a bad person on a leash. And that's why that if you rely on these things to govern your morality, to govern your ethics, as I prefer it, then essentially you are, as is commonly known, a very wicked person simply on a leash. And some people need that leash. I found in my time as a counselor doing trauma counseling, I found that some people need religion. Some people benefit from it emotionally, although they are not really the best people. It's better if they were religious than if they were not. But these are extreme cases and extremely rare cases. And this is involving exceptional trauma, which requires some sort of a stable coping mechanism. But I think looking beyond religion, I think recognizing that people are more than their labels, recognizing that people are more than their religion, and embracing the humanistic element within all of us, I think is the relevant of how I stay grounded while engaging with various religions. And I've been better for it.
Yeah, I didn't even know you were like a grief counselor and stuff like that. That's a whole nother subject. We can talk about that. But we do have to end. My last question for you where would people find you?
Well,
and I forgot to ask for the plugs. If you want me to plug anything, I can add that in after.
Absolutely,
in the description
I'll gladly
note.
send it
But where
to
do
you.
people find you, and how can they support your work?
Well, they can find me everywhere. They can find me on LinkedIn.
Say that one more time.
Because of the heinous racism and bigotry existing on that platform. But I am basically all over. You simply can just Google me, and you can find all of my socials everywhere, basically. But more specifically, if you want my website is currently drtristankapp.wordpress.com. I plan on upgrading it soon, hopefully.
I will put it in the descriptions, everybody.
But yes, I'll send you all of the plugs and then people can access it. But it's basically my name and my surname is all my social media handles. I'm even on TikTok, although I'm not active much, but mainly everywhere you can find me.
Yeah, a couple of people said that they found you and they have subscribed and everything that they.
Oh, lovely! Thank you very much.
Yes. So thank you so much for coming on. Lovely. Before I leave, now I forget stuff so much. Like I forgot. Hold on 1 second. I do have a show Friday, and I'm gonna think who's my show on. So we have calendars. Okay, Natch, who is a trans woman, late transitioning, talking about her story, will be on. And that's going to be on Sovereign Intimacy section of my channel. We're going to deep dive into that. So, a few things that I want to plug as well. I'm going to show two quick little videos before we end, and then we'll end the show. Two things that Black non-believers are going to be involved in. The first, now, I will make mention, I will be there as well. I'm not speaking, but if you want to say hi, I'll be there. And Jess from Hollywood and Asteroid is the one who did that video, and I think she just went live, or this is a video she posted. So after you guys leave my channel, please make sure that you join her, what she's doing right now. Last thing I will promote is Revival of Reason. If you guys haven't got a ticket, join us either virtually or in person. And I am going to be a speaker for that one.
What's up, y'all? Mandisa Thomas here, inviting you to be in 2026 Revival of Reason in Atlanta, Georgia. From June 12th through the 14th, join us at the Atlanta Free Thought Hall and Pavilion, where we will be celebrating 15 years of Black non-believers with food, fun, serious discussions, live entertainment, and more. Speakers include Chris Cameron, Candace Gorham, Detroit Atheist Queen, The Friendly Atheist, Godless Engineer, Cynthia McDonald, yours truly, and more. Get your tickets today at blacknonbelievers.org or scan that QR code below. Also, you can book your room at our special group room rate at the Comfort Inn, Atlanta, Smyrna. Official BN members get a discount, so please make sure you become an official member today. Sponsorship opportunities are also available, as well as discounted student rates. Thank you so much for helping us celebrate 15 years as Black non-believers, and we will see you soon.
Okay, so make sure that you support us, join us, June 12th to the 14th. I will thank you, everybody, for tuning in today, and I will see everybody Friday, 1 p.m. Have a good one.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride.